Hello everyone, this is Houston, and in this video we are going to keep working on the project, the project that I started a few weeks ago. And in this part of the project I would like to keep going with the modeling. So we have the lighthouse, the house itself, trees, stones, the pier and the boat. And in this part, if the video got like super huge, I'll probably have to split, but I'll try to run as fast as I can to finish this modeling part and then start the next video, which is related with the materials, rendering, the layout of the scene itself, and organizing the things I modeled. Okay, so I would like to talk a little bit about the style that I'm looking for, and I don't know exactly what I want, but I'm pretty sure about what I don't want to do on this project. So every time we start working on anything, we have to think about what we want, but this question is really hard to answer. And right now I have a very sketchy idea of the whole thing in my mind, but I have no solid idea of this thing at all. Okay, just remember that my process, it's not involving drawing or this kind of thing, so I'm doing everything on the fly. I'm experimenting with the tools, with the proportions, with the shapes, because this is the way I feel more comfortable and more creative. Okay, but if you want, you can draw or sketch something, and then from this sketch you can jump to the modeling, and this is even better because it's going to give you more clarity about what you want to achieve. Okay, so I would like to jump into Pinterest and show you some references of what I am trying to achieve here. Here inside Pinterest, it's very easy to get lost with the amounts of references that we have. And as I said, I am not sure exactly what I'm looking for, but I'm pretty sure what I don't want. Okay, so I would like to start with that. So I don't want this kind of thing. I don't want to work on a very low poly style. I don't want to use low poly references. I don't want this. I don't like this aesthetical feeling of something very rough. I like something like this, something more smooth, with and this composition is really beautiful. I like this one. Something that can be very stylized at the same time. You can have very realistic shaders like the clouds. I'm pretty sure that this is that there's a lot of Photoshop on this thing, but at the same time I like the shadows, I like the lighting. It's very natural, it's very realistic on a very stylized scene. So changing or mixing this type of style is something that I like very much. Okay, so for example, I like this is super smooth, although this is a drawing, of course. I like the smooth shapes, the rounded shapes, so I don't want rough things. I don't want something that reminds me low poly objects. I want something a little more complex, so I'm not trying to reach this type of look. Okay, so what I did was basically went to Pinterest, and I always have like a bunch of cool references. Some of those collections, they are public, they are for you actually. From time to time I go to Pinterest and I take a lot of references and I give to my students as a way to inspire them to do things. So for example, I like very much this type of thing. Okay, I like the details, I like the displacement of the bricks here. I like the type of ceiling. I like the amount of details that I have here. This is probably very hard to achieve, but I would like to explore something like this. So I will probably start with the basic shape of the lighthouse. And I would probably do like the lighthouse with a house attached to the lighthouse, because I like this style. And I'll try to do both in a sequence, but first I'll start with the lighthouse. I think this is a very good idea, and it's a very interesting way to keep the pace. Okay, I'm going to save this thing on my main reference, because I think this is super important to always go back and look to this thing and see how they worked some shapes. And I also like the rocks. As you can see here, they're very simple to achieve. I'm going to show you like different ways to achieve this look, but you already know the tools, and I will probably use a combination of booleans and remesh or retopology inside Maya to achieve this look. Okay, and here I will have a very interesting opportunity to explore Maya mesh as a way to take a bunch of objects and impose those objects on a random layout. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to achieve this look and how to achieve the look here on the body of the lighthouse. I really like this lighthouse design. I think it's really beautiful, and it's not that complicated. To be very honest, we will have a very interesting opportunity to explore this rounded shape with random size objects, and this is going to be very interesting. So let's jump into Maya and start working on the lighthouse itself. Something I always do before starting a project is to make sure that I am working on that specific project. Okay, so you just have to go to File, Set Project, okay, and then select the folder of the project and then hit Set. Okay, I do that to make sure that Maya knows that I'm working on that specific project, and we are good to go. Okay. The second thing is, since I'm going to model like a lot of objects and eventually I will have like millions of polygons on my screen, I have to be aware of the amount of polygons that I'm using on certain objects, on specific objects, because this can be very problematic at some point. Okay, so if you go to display heads up display, poly count, I use this tool. I already talked about this in the past as a way to keep track of the polygons. Okay, so I would like to start with a brick, and this brick is going to be very simple. I just need to put like 2 in the width of this guy, height and depth. I'm going to keep exactly the same value, because if I want, I can randomize this thing in the future. Okay, something I would like to do with this brick is to add a little bit of information, polygonal information, some subdivisions on this direction, because eventually I will bend this object. Okay, so to bend this object, at least in one axis, to bend this object like in this direction, I will need to have some divisions here, okay, crossing the object. I don't need divisions everywhere. I just need divisions on the parts that I am going to use this information, okay? Keep that in mind. So that's why I'm not going to invest on a lot of divisions everywhere. Just on this part, I will probably put one division kind of crossing the object in the middle here and in the middle here, just to keep the consistency when we decide to smooth the surface of this object. Okay, what I mean by smooth is if you hit 3, you're going to subdivide this guy. Subdividing, you're going to increase the amount of polygons that you have, and this is what I mean by subdividing. Okay, so in this case, 2 by 1 by 1 with let's talk about the divisions here. 3 divisions, or in this case 4, because we have like 4 divisions on this axis. 2 divisions on this axis and 2 divisions also on this axis. This is more than enough. Okay, now we are going to edges, double click with shift, of course, double click and double click. I am selecting the top ones and shift, continue selecting all the edges around the object. Okay, all the edges that goes around the object. Why am I doing that? Because I want to apply a bevel on those edges. I want to kind of smooth those edges to give this brick look. Okay, so we have the edges, shift right mouse button, go to the bevel edge, and with control selected or control pressed, you can click and drag on the name of the property. So I want something small, like something like this. I am a little bit obsessed by precise values. You don't have to worry about that. Okay, how about the segments? So the segments here, I can work with at least 2 segments, but if I put 2 segments here, this would be probably more than enough to achieve the look I want. And if I need more, I have to remember that this guy is going to be very smooth, right? If I hit 3, as you can see, we have like a smooth brick. Again, I am looking for this smooth design. I'm not looking for something that looks like very low poly. Okay, so this is more than enough. So try to think about the amount of information that you really need. So don't invest or do not increase the amount of polygons right away, because this can be very problematic on the long run. Okay, always remember to first rename this guy. So this is the brick 000. Okay, why 000? Because I know that this guy is the original one. Okay, the second and probably the most important thing is delete the history, freeze the transformations. Although we don't have any transformations right now, we will have in a moment. And center the pivot. Doesn't cost to do the same thing. Okay, if I move this guy up, okay, this is not mandatory. We don't have to do that, but you have to be aware that I am going to use mesh. Okay, if you move this guy, if you rotate this guy, if you do anything with this guy, mesh is going to ignore those information completely, unless you freeze the information before start working with mesh. Okay, so what I'm going to do in this case is zeroed out everything. So this guy is in the middle of the floor, as you can see, and it's at the center of the word, and I am good to go. I'm using precise values here. I know that this guy have like 1 by 1 by 2. Okay, and 2, what I mean by 2 is 2 centimeters. Okay, and I also going to save this thing as lighthouse. I don't have to do that, by the way. If I want, I can go inside the island here and I can model everything inside just one file. But I decided to show you a very interesting way to work with multiple files and big projects. This is going to be not that big, but it's a very professional way to work with a lot of objects and to compose scenes. Okay, so bear with me. Let's keep this object separated on a external file. All the objects that we're going to model, we are going to keep in separate files. Okay, this is going to guarantee that we will have a very tight and professional scene at the end. Okay, I guarantee that. So let's save this lighthouse file and we are good to go. Okay, again, everything is clean. I have a name, I don't have transformations, I have absolutely nothing. And this thing here on the corner, by the way, this is very annoying. Okay, if you want to know how to deal with that, you just have to go to Window, Settings and Preferences, and here we have this View Cube. Okay, View Cube is the name of this puppy here. You just have to click here and you are going to disable or enable if you want. Okay, I'm going to disable because I need more space on my screen. Okay, if you want to use, suit yourself. In this case, I have this brick and I would like to start right away using mesh, and I'm going to select the object, click on mesh. And before I do anything else, I would like to also click on this button here. This is the mesh editor, and you can find this guy here if you go to animation or effects. Okay, go to the mesh menu, and this is the icon mesh editor. Okay, it's exactly the same thing, mesh editor. click here, and this is a very interesting way to access the nodes. If you click on the guys here, you can see that right away you can change very fast between the main nodes here. You don't have to look for anything, okay? So this guy, the mesh one, is going to be the first row of our tower, okay? This first row, of course, everything is absolutely wrong here because I'm duplicating this object using the mesh distribute nodes on a linear way, and I don't want to do that. So at least I want to use a radial distribution, something like this. Of course, it's completely wrong. And how to deal with that? You just have to go here to the radial axis, change to Z and Y, change the number of points as well. So if you want to work with 10, it's totally fine. You just have to think about exactly what you want and the radius of this thing. So we have to compress this thing a little bit more. And right now, as you can see, we have this very flat look, and we have the bricks like touching each other. This is not a problem, okay? You have to be aware that this is not a problem. If this is something that bothers you, bear with me, because I need the bricks touching each other on a certain level. If you like this flat look of the brick and going around, you can keep things like this. But if you don't like, I'm going to show you a super cool way to deal with that. So I'm going to work with precise numbers here, 2.5, and as you can see, everything is very, very tight because of the size of the bricks, and I think this is not a good idea. So set 7.5, maybe this is a good idea. So I'm putting like a little bit of spacing, okay? And I don't even like to work with the distribute node, okay? If you don't want to work with the distribute node, there's other options. So for example, I can try to experiment this guy going back to 1, and instead of the mesh distribute, let's put the radius 0 here. Instead of the mesh distribute, we can go up to the mesh, to the main node of mesh as well. And here on the mesh, we can add other things. So one of the things that we can use is the replicator, okay? If we add a replicator, we can select this guy and we can try to replicate this object using this approach, okay? You have to kind of work with all the settings, and it's a little bit tricky. So you can rotate the replicators, you can do a lot of things. So depending on what you're doing, one node is better than the other, okay? But in this case, just to start, I think working with the distribute might be a good idea. So I'm going to select this guy, delete. We are going to return to the distribute. Again, I am experimenting with my object, okay? So we have to put like 10 here, and we have to increase this spacing here. Let me give you a tip. So if you know that you already changed the values, and if you think that working with sliders it's not comfortable for you, what you can do is select the object, the product of the object, and you can go to the channel box and you can see the nodes here, but this is not exactly the best way to do that. So if you select the mesh node, you will have access to the settings here. For example, this is the mesh distribute, okay? So you just have to go to the mesh distribute node and look for the values that you change it. So for example, I changed the radius here. You just have to select the name of the property, hold Control and middle mouse button and click and drag, okay? This might be more comfortable for some of you, okay? So for example, I noticed that I have a brick crossing this middle axis here, but I don't have a brick crossing this side, okay? So in this case, to solve this problem, we can go to the mesh distribute node. You can choose the way you want to work, okay? Sometimes you cannot see the things right away. You just have to click and click again, and then click on the node and everything will be fine. So for example, if you select something else, you just have to go here and click. If you don't see something, click again on the node, okay? Don't double click, otherwise you're going to rename, okay? If you go to the number, let me see if I can increase, and right away I am trying to increase this number to a even number, of course. Just see if I can reach this middle, and as you can see, sometimes it's not possible, okay? Again, I don't want to increase too much the amount of bricks I have, but with more bricks, I have more detail. With more detail, I have more possibilities of randomization, and yeah, probably a better result at the end, okay? So I like this result, but I would like to take the brick. The original brick is hidden, okay? I would like to bring this guy, hit H, and I would like to transform this guy. You just have to remember that everything here is based on the idea of if you go to modify, you have actually edit, duplicate special. If you go to the options, we have those two options. We talked about this, copy and instance, okay? Everything here works like instances, okay? Although those objects, they are like physical objects, as you can see, we're generating always a mesh, okay? Everything I do on the vertices of this object, as you can see here, if I move this guy, I can affect all of the copies on my scene. Okay, so knowing that, I can, for example, apply a transformation, a deformer to this guy here, and I can affect all the objects at the same time. So if I do that, I can get a round shape on this guy. Okay, this is just one way to do that. This is not the only one, but this is just one way to do that. There is a lot of different ways to do that. I could, for example, create a line with objects side by side, and I could use a band operation to bend everything and make a circle. Okay, that is another way to do that. But doing this using mesh, I will have access to a lot of very crazy and funny things. I'm going to show you one in a second. Okay, so let's select the brick. Okay, I just brought the brick back because it was hidden, as you can see here. Okay, you just have to select the object and hit H. So I'm going to take this guy, go into the animation menu, the form, non-linear, sorry, and use the bend option. Okay, right away you can see this white thing here. This is the handle, okay? And we have to align this handle with the object. So we have to rotate this handle to match the rotation of the object. So let's rotate this guy. Let's go to the channel box and put like 9, 0 here, okay? If you go to the options of this band handle, by the way, it's a good idea to take the name of the object and always put the name of the object on your deformers, okay, like this. If you do that, you know that this guy is controlling this guy. Why am I doing that? Because I am creating something procedural, something that I can change in the middle of the way, okay, if I want. You just have to select the brick, the band handle, okay, and you can go to the curvature, select the property, hold control, middle mouse button, and right away you can see that you are changing the curvature of the brick because you are changing the curvature of the band, right? So, and here we go. That's what we have, okay? We have to adjust a little bit because I would like to have a small gap between those guys. So you just have to select the node. As you can see, I'm not seeing my properties here. Just click again and you will see the properties, okay? So in this case, I would like to take the radius and I would like to amplify this radius just a little bit. And we have to also work on the band handle as well, because I think the angle is kind of ruining my jam here. So 15 maybe, and I have a small gap between them, and this is more than enough, okay? To see what I mean and how this thing impacts the final image or the final 3D object, I just have to select this guy, and please remember to save this thing before trying that, because I'm going to kind of increase the amount of polygons here. Okay, so I'm going to select the object, hit 3, and everything is beautiful, smooth. This is exactly what I wanted. Okay, so if you go to the brick handle, and as you can see, I am working with correct angles. So for example, when I take this guy here, I put 15 here, I just have to go back to the mesh distribute and use like values that allows me to put those guys apart. So 7 and 5. And this is more than enough. They are not that far from each other. They are kind of touching each other. I think so. Yes, and this is what I want. I want to close the gap, but I also want to see the gap, okay? So this is the first row. I can take my original brick and I can hide. I can save this thing, and now I can play with this guy. I can take the mesh, the repro mesh, by the way. Let's rename this thing to original row, okay? When we do that, you will see that the name that you put on the main mesh node is replicated to the other object, and it's easier to select what you want to do. And be careful with that. I kind of forgot that. Everything is smooth here. I'm going to hit 1 to go back to the original polygons, because it's easier to work with this with less polygons on the screen. Okay, this is another very important thing. You cannot delete this guy. If you delete this guy, you are going to stop influencing the brick, which by the way is hidden, right? Let me demonstrate that. If you select this guy here, as you can see, this is the band handle. If I delete this guy, I'm going to stop influencing this brick, which by the way is going to implicate in stopping influencing the bands of the other bricks. Okay, so don't do that. If you want to do that at the end, just delete the history and everything is fine. But right now I am trying to keep all the history, all the track of the main things, because I want to use this information to work on a procedural way. Okay, so now let's go back to 5. Let's hide this guy here. Let's take this handle and hide as well. And we are going to take this original repro mesh, and we can add another node. So let's go back to the top node here, and let me see. Oh, okay, we have to select this guy here, and you have access to everything. So what I want is to use a replicator. Okay, if I click on replicator, I can take the replicator and I can increase this number here, and right away you can see that it's replicating, but of course on the wrong axis, because the information of the axis here is completely wrong. Okay, so I'm going to put 0 here, and I'm going to offset position Y, and I'm going to increase this number. Okay, on doing that, I can increase the amount of replicants, and I can increase the position, and I will have something like this. But this is at the same time beautiful and boring. Very, very, very boring. Okay, I don't want that. Probably you also don't want that. I'm going to put 20 because I want to model something like bigger. And what I mean by boring is everything is exactly the same. Okay, what we can do is, if you go to the replicator here, you have the possibility of working with the position, okay, the scale, and the rotation. Okay, so in this case you can also have this pattern here. The pattern is super cool because the pattern can help you to put offsets on the objects. Okay, this number here means exactly that. So instead of just doing everything, you are going to skip one and apply on the other, skip one and apply on the other. So every other object is going to be affected if you put 2 on the pattern. Okay, what I mean by that is pattern scale, pattern rotation. Let's take the rotation here, and if you rotate right now, you see that, oh my god, we are affecting the individual object. Can you see? This is really beautiful. Then generate like beautiful patterns for motion graphics, and this is, by the way, the core of this tool. But this is not what I want. So what we have now is a situation where if I do anything on this original row, I'm going to affect the bricks individually. I don't want to do that. I want to affect the entire row. I want to duplicate the entire row. So what I'm going to do is to take this replicator from here, right mouse button and hit delete. Okay? Yep. So now I have this thing here. Instead of replicating, instead of trying to change one by one, which I already did to achieve this result, I would like to take the entire thing, like the entire mesh. Okay, you have to select the entire mesh on your outliner and click on mesh again. If you do that, you are going to create a mesh, this one, from a mesh. This is cool. So here we have the original row and with all the information that we have on the original row. So we take the result of the original row and we kind of created new replicants for this guy. So in this case, this is the replicant or rows, something like that. So you have the original one and you have the replicant one. By the way, the order here doesn't matter because it's a alphabetical order, but what matters is what is going on in your scene, and you have to be aware of that. That's why I am renaming things. So I know that this guy is controlling all the original objects that constructed this first row, and the replicants is going to take this guy and is going to promote this guy to another level. So instead of again using a distribute on the replicant rows, I'm going to take just one object like this. Okay, I'm going to zero out all the values, and instead of using the distribute node, you cannot disable this guy, by the way. This is activated by default. Okay, instead of using just one, I would like to select this replicant role and go to replicator. I'm going to use a replicator, and on this replicator I can go up like this position. Let's put this thing 0. Okay, and let's try to replicate this thing on Y. As you can see, now everything is working as it should. Okay, so 0.1, 1, yes. So that's the main advantage of working with precise numbers and precise scale. So for example, I know that the offset position is 1. I can just take the replicator and I can move up, and I can build like a huge tower. Of course, this is not what I want. I want something like this maybe, because I have to construct the other parts as well. Okay, I think 20 or 25. 25 is a good number. Thinking about the aesthetical results that I want to achieve. What I would like to do is I would like to go back to the original row. Okay, but before doing that, I would like to try to randomize a little bit this thing. So that's why I have this replicant row. I have the replicant replicator. Oh Jesus, it's way too much. And I can play with those values here. So now I can rotate. So if I play with this rotation here, I can literally create this brick kind of pattern, but this is still very, very, very boring. Okay, so how to solve this boringness on this object? So I'm going to the original row, and I'm going to add a little bit of variation to this guy. To add variation, you can use a random. Okay, we just have to click on add random node, and right away you can see some random crazy thing happening. I don't want, for example, to randomize the position, which by the way is what is happening by default. So I zeroed out everything. What I want to random is the scale. Okay, just try to remember that if you don't want to see the final result right away, you can disable this thing here, boom, and we will have just the original one, but we lost the original copy because the original copy is hidden here. Okay, so you have to bring this guy back if you want to see. I would like to see the final result. I would like to see everything happening at the same time. Okay, because I have a good machine, although this is already very, very heavy when it comes to polygons, okay? Let's go to the original randomize, and I'm going to randomize the scale. Try to remember, everything we do on the original roll is going to affect individually the bricks, okay? So you can use like very small values here, very small values, to achieve this randomness effect on the sizes of the things, on the imposition of the objects. And you can also try to go to the, let's see if I think I can go to the ramps and try to play with the rotations, but I'm not sure if this is even possible, if something is going to change here if I change those values. I don't think so. It's not changing at all, okay? In this case, I'm not sure if I have the power to change anything here. If I work on the Z, it's going to break everything. I don't want that. Again, I am trying to experiment with this thing, okay? This is the angle. The angle is going to close or open, so this is really good for creating animations, okay? But I don't think that I have enough to play with the randomization just of the scale. So I'm going to kind of try to play with the random node here and try to work with the scale of those guys. Let me see if I can scale this thing on a negative. No, it do not accept negative values. It's kind of weird. So I can try to keep the X. Sometimes I go like very far just to see what is really changing. So for example, this is going to kind of ruin the gaps that I have between the objects. So I don't want to scale in X, okay? But I think scaling in Y might give me something cool. I will have even more gaps. And this is what I'm looking for, actually. I'm looking for gaps. I'm looking for this randomization. And I would like to also scale in Z. So let's see. Okay, Z is the height of the object, okay? So putting very, very small values can help us to break the impression of continuity. So for example, here I can put like 0.5 as well, but this requires a little bit more, 0.4. So I am scaling in Y. I'm not scaling in X. Again, your situation might be a little bit different than mine, okay? You can also work with this normalized random if you think that this is going to help. Again, you have to be aware that sometimes we do like very small changes and it changes too much. So I don't want to work with the normalize. The transformation space can be local, so every individual object, or it can be the world, okay? So this is another very important thing, because I can transform the objects on a local basis and I can transform based on the world, okay? It's the thing about local and global spaces, okay? So if I have this type of thing, this might be a good idea. This might be something good, but I'm not sure if it is. So sometimes using smaller values to preserve the gaps between the tiling might be better, okay? If you are happy with the results, something you can do is go back to the rows and to the distribute, and actually on the replicator, let me see if I can take the replicator and just randomize the patterns here and randomize not the position. I think the position is not very wise, but if we make like columns differently, so for example, I can take this pattern here and I can increase to 3, and he's going to affect every 3 columns, every 4. Maybe using like 2, which is the minimum, is the ideal for this thing. We have offset and we have scale as well. So if we work with the scaling of this object, this might be a good idea, like small scaling differences, very tiny scaling differences, just to have something to break the impression of continuity. Okay, so what we can do here is, once again, go to the original guy and add another random. Okay, random is awesome because random is a way to take things out of the order and break some very boring shapes. So we can play with the rotation to have literally random bricks like this. As you can see, I was just playing with the rotation Y, and then suddenly I have this type of thing. Okay, and this is kind of exaggerated in some parts, so I think this is because of the scaling that I put in some places. I think it's not quite a good idea. As you can see here, it's kind of hurting my original idea. So 1.1 pattern scale 0.1, and everything is a little bit tighter. And there we go. So this is a very cool way to randomize things. Okay, so since we use deformer to get that shape, I would like to use another deformer to kind of bend this thing towards the top. Okay, we don't have to use this thing all the time. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this mesh here, the repro mesh of the replicant row, which is the final result of the things that we did. Okay, select the mesh, go to the animation, the form. In this case, I'm going to use nonlinear, and I'm going to use a flare. Okay, this flare I can control using the and, X, and Z. Okay, I'm going to select those 2 guys and then hold Control and then kind of squeeze a little bit towards the top. So 0.75 is more than enough. And try to remember to rename the things. So for example, this is the replicant row repro mesh, and this is the flare that was applied to the replicant rows. Okay, using the same names can make your life a little bit better in the future. Okay, so try to remember that if you want to move something, so for example, if you try to move this tower, so let's suppose that this is something that is bothering you, it's in the middle of the ground, right? If you try to move this guy, you will notice right away that you cannot. Okay, this is one of the limitations of mesh, and you have to understand how to solve this problem. So to deal with that, oh, I did something wrong. I didn't have the intention of creating another mesh. Okay, to solve this problem, let me save this thing because I like the result. To solve this problem, you have to open up your mesh editor, okay, and select the last thing that you created. The last thing is not the original one, is the replicant rows. So this is the final one, right? This guy here. If you go to the mesh itself, you have the option of adding a transform node to this final result, because there is no transform node at all. If you try to move this transform node, this handle here, you see that you can move the thing, but you cannot move the result, right? So to be able to do that, select this node here, the last one that you create, go to the transform here, add the transform. Now you can move, rotate, and scale, but you don't have any handle to do that. If you try to see a handle here, you see that, okay, I am on the move tool, I'm seeing this guy, but I cannot move, right? So go to the replicant rows transform node, and here on the control, you can right click, and then use the create. When you do that, Maya is going to create this handle for you. So with this handle, you can move whatever you want. But remember that you have a flare on this guy, right? If you try to move this object without moving the transform handles, what is going to happen is you are going to lose the influence of the handle over this object. What you have to do is select this guy here, which is the transformation, right? Hold Control, select the flare, and now you can move both at the same time, and you are not going to lose your transformations. So if you want to put this guy up, what you have to do is go to the side view. This dark line is my ground, so you just have to click and drag and put this guy there. This is more than enough. I don't want to put like on top of the ground because I want to see a little bit of dirt like bearing this tower, okay? So going back, my tower is finished, but at least the base of the tower is finished. We have to now start working on the top part, okay? So save the file, and now we are going to start working on the top part. What I have so far is a little bit different than the original reference. If you look to the tower itself, you will see that the bricks, they have different sizes and they have different roles. So if you want to reproduce something exactly like this with different sizes and different roles, what you can do is you can create 2 or 3 different types of roles with different sizes of bricks, and you can use mesh to combine those different roles together and to replicate this thing on y-axis. So duplicate to the top and kind of apply some sort of randomization. In this image, you can see that this probably was done by hand, so block by block. I sincerely doubt that they probably do not use mesh, but they created some sort of randomization, okay, using the different sizes of blocks, the different alignment, and I kind of like the results, but I also trying to do something very stylized on my version and something at the same time simple, okay? So now I'm going to start working on the top portion, building this top part, and try to keep this proportion on the top. If you look to the entire thing, you notice that this top part is, I don't know, almost the tower itself is the tower. I mean the part with the bricks. It's almost 2.5 of the size of this top part. Okay, so 2 times bigger than this top part. So I'll try to keep this proportion in mind and try to do something thinner on top and with those boards side by side. And the top part is very simple to model, so we can use different techniques, but I'll try to keep simple. Okay, I'll start with just cylinders and probably apply a mesh to duplicate those objects around and try to do something similar to this, but of course always trying to do something unique, something my own. Okay, okay, let's jump into Maya and start doing that. Now that we established the base of this object, I would like to jump to the top part. And to start modeling this top part, I'm going to use multiple techniques. Starting with the base, I'm going to create a cylinder to bring this guy up. I'm going to subdivide the cylinder a few times, but before doing that, I prefer to, instead of working with the subdivisions here, I prefer to do this by hand. Okay, it's just a matter of personal preference. Okay. I'm going to isolate this guy. So if you click here, you can isolate this object, and I can delete the top part. That's easy in this case to select the body of the cylinder, and then invert the selection. So if you go to select, inverse, you can delete at the same time the top and the bottom, okay, like this. Just hit delete and everything is cool. So I'm going to take this guy, I'm going to squeeze a little bit. Again, I don't care about size, I care about the appearance of this object. So what I'm going to do is take this object here, go to the edge mode, select the edge, and then I'm going to apply a extrude edge. Okay, in this case I can center the pivot of the handler here. I can click on any of those boxes here to activate this tool, and I can click and drag. When I do that, the extrusion happens to the outside, and this is what I want. I'm going to repeat the last command. The repeat last command inside Maya is G. If you hit G, you will create a new extrude. I'm going to again center the pivot, and instead of clicking on the boxes, I'm just going to drag this handle here to the top. And this is what I want, because I'm going to put this guy on the base of my object. Just have to draw this thing like with similar height. Another thing I would like to do is go to the edge mode and select this edge here and this edge here, just to see what I selected. I selected both edges, and I'm going to bevel those edges at the same time. So I'm going to hold Control, click and drag here to create just a small bevel, something like 0.35 with 2 or 3 divisions. Oh, sorry, it's not that. 0 with segments. 3 segments, but 3 segments might be too much. I'm going to work with just 2, because I just want to create some smoothness here when I subdivide this shape, but at the same time I want to keep control over the amount of polygons that I already have on my scene. So if I try to smooth this guy, this is going to be the result. Okay, something kind of smooth, but at the same time you can read the shapes very well. So after that, I can delete the history, freeze the transformations. As you can see, I have a lot of transformations here. Delete history, freeze transformations, and center pivot. And I would like to go outside of the isolation to see the size of this guy and start working on the alignment of this object with the base. Okay, I can match this object kind of with the base here, but as you can see, there's something missing here. Okay, so what we can do in this case is go to the edge mode, double click on this edge here, extrude this edge to inside, doing the same thing we did already. I don't care about closing this gap, because nobody's going to see actually this inside part. They are just going to see this part here. So I'm going to select this edge and this edge loop, actually double click on the edge loop, and I'm going to bevel this edge with a small fraction, kind of similar to what I had here with just 2 segments, because now we can work with the smoothness and see the final result, which is cool. Okay, if you want something even more tight, my suggestion is to put those edge loops or this bevel here kind of close to each other, but I like this result. I think this is kind of robust, and now I can work on the top part. To work on the top part, I can do this using several different approaches, but I would like to use the most simpler one in this case. So try to remember to go back to one subdivision. Okay, I'm going to put this thing top base. I don't know which name I should give to this object, but this is more than enough. Okay, bring to top just a little bit. Yep, and now I can work on the other things, but before doing that, try to remember always center pivots, delete the history, and freeze the transformations, okay? Center pivot's not that necessary, but in this case it's cool because I'm working again on a very centralized and very well aligned modeling. As you can see, the center pivot is perfectly aligned with the center of my scene. It's a good idea to try to hide those handles. Do not delete this guy. If you delete this guy right now, you're going to lose this deformation that we created on the tower. I'm just going to hide this guy, hide everything that we don't need. We need this guy, of course. And now we can move to the top part, and to model the top part, I am going to use a simple technique, okay? So this is the idea. I'm going to start with a cube. I'm going to bring this cube up. I'm going to take this guy here and go close and make something very clear. When we work on any type of pattern using mesh, it's always a good idea to do this thing close to the ground, close to the 000 of the world, because it makes more sense with the transformations. Okay, some of the transformations, not all of them, but for example, the rotation and the scale, they can interfere with mesh. So I prefer, as a way to make control over the things I'm doing, I prefer to work kind of close to the center. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to hide the tower, and I'm going to hide this object that I created, which is the top base. And I'm going to select this object here, and I'm going to bring again to the center of the world, and I'm going to create a very simple object. Okay, again, I don't care about sizes, I don't care about scale, I don't care about anything right now. I just care about the proportions. So I'm going to make something kind of big like this. Okay, be aware of the proportion of the object. Okay, the sizes, they do not matter too much, but the proportions, they matter a lot. So we can make this thing bigger. We can bring the tower later on just to compare sizes and so on, but don't worry too much about this right now. Okay, so what I want is I'm going to save, and if you don't get that part so far, I'm using a combination of mesh to replicate several objects at the same time, and also deformation. So when I go to animation, I have a bunch of deformations here that I can use to make my design even more interesting. Okay, so let's go back to the modeling here, and I'm going to take a few things into consideration. So first of all, the pivot point of the object is perfectly centralized on the object, and the object is perfectly centralized at the center of the world. I have the impression, this is just an impression, okay, that if I take the pivot point of this object and I align with this face here, I will have more options, but I have no idea whatsoever if this thing is going to work. So that's why I'm going to keep everything centralized here as a way to keep the control of over the object. Okay, so I have to freeze the transformations. This is extremely important. Okay, for mesh, I can keep the inputs, but keep the transformations is a huge problem. Okay, in this case, I don't want any of those, so I can delete the history. I can freeze the transformations, which I always do as a way to make my scene lighter, and I want to rename this guy. So this is going to be like top base board singular, because it's just one object. Okay. Okay. Let's apply mesh, and let's right away bring the editor, mesh editor, to see this guy. So if this guy is called top base board, this is going to be called top base boards. Okay, the order here, by the way, doesn't matter, as I said before. What matters is the name of the object, and that you have mesh already on your scene, and you can control like different things just clicking on those guys. So if you go here, you can change right away, instead of linear, we can use a radio, and we can change the radio axis to something like this. And right away, you can see the orientation is wrong. Okay, I was already expecting to see a wrong orientation, which is perfectly normal. What I'm going to do is I'm going to the board itself, so the object itself, which is hidden. I'm going to unhide the object, and if I rotate this object, I can affect the final result. Okay, doesn't matter which direction I rotate. I really don't care about that. You just have to be aware that you have to be here on the channel box, put a number like this, 90 degrees, and you can work with the object like so. Selecting the node itself, you can decrease the radius. Okay, if you need more objects, and which is, by the way, we need actually more objects, you can increase the amount of objects here. But as you can see, I always try to work with even numbers. So for example, 16 is going to give me one board here crossing this axis, but they're trying to touch each other. They're starting to touch each other, which is not a problem. Okay, one way to solve that is using a very simple trick. But before trying to use this trick, I would like to have like different sizes, different thickness, different types of boards. So I would like to put some sort of randomization on this guy. So I'm going to select this node here, and actually the top node, and I'm going to add a random to this guy, and I'm going to bring the position always to 0, and then I'm going to work with the scale in Y. Why this axis? Because of the axis that I have here. Y is up, so I want to have like a thicker board, not so thicker board, and so on. So how to do that? Go to the scale Y and increase this thing, and you see that right away something is off. Can you see the problem? Things are okay. This is not the axis at all. Why? I'm changing Y, and the thing is not changing properly because we rotated the board. Can you see? We rotated the board, so this is no longer valid. But if I go to other axis, you see that if I crank this thing up, you see that you have different thickness. This is exactly what I'm looking for. Okay, so with a very small value, 0.0 something, 0.05, you can work on the position as well, trying to randomize this position a little bit. And if you want to put those objects close to each other, and by the way, this is way too much, 0.5, just to have a little bit of randomization already. Okay, if you look close, you see that you already have randomization on the thickness and randomization on the alignments. Okay, so if you want, or if you think that this is way too much, you can go and reduce this by half. This is my workflow for working on this type of thing. So I would like to also have, and this is super important, let's go to the top here, just to see this thing, and you will see that all the boards, they have like the same size here. If I try to increase the scale X is scaling on the wrong direction. I don't want that. If you try to scale in Y, you will see that, oh, the boards, they are reflecting this scale to the outside, to the inside, which is perfect. This is exactly what I want. So I'm going to put a little bit bigger value here. And if you think that the rotation or this transformation is happening more to the inside than the outside, because of course we're not seeing the touches here and we cannot read this difference of the boards on a perfect way, what we can do is, first of all, if you want more details on this object, what we can do is, if you isolate this object and go to the edge mode, and just to select all the edges, like I did now, I selected all the edges, okay, you can go outside of the isolation, and everything we do here is going to affect all the other objects, right? Save your scene before, and shift right mouse button and go to bevel edges. When you bevel one edge here, you are going to bevel everything, okay? Bevel with a small value, something like 35, and something like 2 segments. Just 2, okay? Don't go crazy on this thing. Another thing we can do is, if we go to the object mode, you can go to the animation menu set, go to the form, and apply a lattice with 2 by 2 by 2 divisions. By default, This is 2 by 5 by 2. So we just have to put 2 here. If you do that, you are going to have a very, very, very simple lattice. If you want more divisions to add more randomness, you also need to add more polygons to this object. Otherwise, you will never be able to deform this object properly. Let's create, and right away we have this green weird box around the object. Okay, so take the name of the object. I always do that. I go to the deformer and put in front of the deformer. So now you know that this object have a close relationship with this object. This object is changing the topology of this object, okay? If you hide the top board, we don't need to see the top board anymore because we have this guy, okay? This guy is affecting this guy, and this guy is affecting all the other copies, okay? What we have to do is, if you go to the lattice itself, you can go to the lattice points, select the point on the top, and you can squeeze the points out using the axis of the width of the object. Can you see what I'm doing? So this is exactly what I want, okay? If you need more boards for some reason, you can go to the distribute here and you can increase the amount of boards to, I don't know, 22 maybe, 22, because again, I'm trying to work with even numbers, okay? And you can keep changing this guy here just to put a little bit of space between those objects. Select the points on the base and you can squeeze the points on the base to also have the same space between the objects. Okay, if the space is too big, you can squeeze a little bit more. And can you see right away I can have a very interesting pattern and repetitions, but at the same time keeping this distance between the boards, and everything is really beautiful. This is exactly what I want. Okay, so with that I can finish this part. Try to remember to always hide your lattices, your transformations, because those lattices they are affecting objects. So you don't want to delete the lattice. If you delete the lattice, you can lose this transformation. Okay, so this is exactly what I want. So how to position this guy on top of the let me see, this is replicant rows, this is the bricks, original rows. Yeah, replicant rows is the tower itself, right? So I should rename this thing a little bit better. So instead of replicant rows, I can take this thing and put like tower. Yeah, it makes way more sense. Now I can take this object here, unhide. Sometimes it works, sometimes not. Yes, unhide this object. Okay, now I have this object, and now I have the boards here that I have to push towards the top. So if that's the case, I can go to the top baseboard here, and I can add a transform to this guy, to the top baseboard, and we can add transform, right mouse button here and click create. Now you can take this handle here and you can push towards the top. This is exactly what I wanted. And we have this also we have this mesh that I created, which is the top base, maybe. Yeah, this one here. So you can take this transform here and you can move to align a little bit better the way you want. And there we go. We have the top base. And now I'm going to close this thing here. I'm going to hide some object and to clean my scene to the next step. So I'm going to take this thing here. I have to hide. Please not delete this, because this have a close relationship with the lattice that we use to transform the boards, which we use to kind of change the shape here on the top. And I'm going to hide, what else? This guy here, because I don't need to see this thing on my screen all the time. And we are good to go and ready to model the next part. So I'm going to save the scene and start modeling the top of the tower. I would like to introduce you to a new tool on Maya 2022, which is capable of using curves and transforming curves into something with thickness. Okay, just so you know, this effect we can achieve this effect doing a series of approaches, but this tool is completely new inside Maya, so I decided to introduce, and it's a very easy and comfortable way to create this type of effect. So for example, I'm going to select all the objects here, hide just for a moment, and I'm going to curves and surfaces. We have a lot of different types of curves here and tools for working with curves, and I would like to also point that if you can go to create, and you can go to not NURBS primitives, but curves too. Okay, this shelf here puts everything together, but they are different things. So NURBS primitives and curves tools, they are a little bit different. So for example, we have CV and EP curve tool. They generate pretty much the same type of curve, but they are essentially different ways to construct curves. But I don't want to talk about this type of technical thing here. You just have to know that they do curves. Okay, they work pretty much on a similar way, but usually curves, they are something very smooth by default. So for example, let's go to the top view, because it's better to explain curves when we work on orthographic views. So if you go to the shelf, we have this EP curve tool. If you double click on this tool here, double click and open up this tool settings, you will see that we have a lot of settings here, and the main part and the thing that matters the most to us is those two guys. This is the default. If you reset the tool, you see that this is the default behavior of the tool. Okay, and what that means, if you click on this tool and start drawing, you have to create a point. When you create the second point, you start seeing the curve, which is just a line, by the way. If you click again, this curve is going to bend to try to conform to the points. Okay, if you click again, the curve is going to change a little bit to try to always accommodate new points. Okay, and what else? Of course, you have a bunch of tools, you have a bunch of techniques to work with curves. If you go to modeling, you have an entire menu here called curves that you can use to improve, to change, to cut, to edit, to do a lot of things with curves. But working with curves inside Maya is something that we can use for certain scenarios. Okay. In the past, the most common scenario was to create profiles to generate meshes spinning around those profiles, or using curves to construct other shapes using primarily this command here, revolve, and this other command here called barrel. And also you can extrude and you can loft. So those two guys here, by far, they are the most common types of commands that we can use to construct shapes using lines. Okay, but this is not the point of this explanation. What I want to show you is using curves, you can generate meshes using this new tool. Okay, so just for the sake of curiosity and trying to finish this explanation, by default, if you go to the AP, you're going to construct a 3 cubic line. What that means is a smooth curve. But if you want straight lines, you can go to one linear and click, 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 and you'll see that you have straight lines. When you finish, hit enter and everything is good to go. Okay, now the way to edit those lines is pretty much the same. So if you click on the points here, you can move the points and you can change the shapes of the lines. Okay, the same thing on this very smooth curve here. If you go to control point, you'll see the control points, they're kind of far from the curve, sometimes very far from the curve, and they kind of guarantee the smoothness of the curve. So if you change the points, you change the smoothness of the curve. Okay, so simple as that. Another very cool application for paths, and we are going to use that, is we can draw a path on a certain place, and we can replicate objects along paths. And we are going to do that because I would like to use this approach to show you how fast we can work replicating objects on top of surfaces. Okay, so going back to the explanation, I would like to demonstrate the usefulness of this new tool. Okay, I'm going to close this thing. Let's go to the perspective and take, for example, this first curve here. Curves are non-renderable entities. That's why we also use curves to create reexon characters, because when you render a character with a bunch of control curves, we cannot see the curves, okay, on the final render. So if you try to render something out of those curves, you will not be able to, because curves are two-dimensional entities and completely ignored by default to the render. Okay, so how to generate meshes using this? Okay, I'm not going to touch the old approach because we don't have a lot of time. I can do that during the classes, but I would like to explain how this thing works with this new tool. So if you go to create, you have this sweep mesh tool. If you click on the options, you will see that, oh, we don't have a lot of options. Okay, we have like one node for multiple curves or one node for each curve. What that means is, if you have a bunch of curves, you can apply the same node to control different curves. Or if you want to control different curves, you can create one node to control this guy, another node to control this guy. Okay, if you want to keep the consistency between different objects, different curves, the best possible way to do that is select both curves and use the same node to control both curves. If you want to have control over just one entity, you can create one node per curve. So in this case, I'm going to use the default. The default is the top one. You just have to apply and close. When you do that, right away, Maya tries to create a mesh that follows the curve. You can see here we have mesh, mesh, curve, curve. This thing is alive. So if you right mouse button on the curve and go to the control vertex and try to move this thing, you will see that the curve is also moving. So you can model very interesting objects with this thing. And it's not only that, you can go back to the tool itself and you can change the settings on the tool to reflect this kind of thing. So for example, if we select the object, you have the sweep shape and we have the sweep mesh create. The sweep shape is the final result. This is the thing you are seeing here. And the sweep mesh creator is the node who controls the appearance of the other object. And you can do a lot of crazy things here. So first of all, you have the sides. With sides, I mean, you can increase or decrease the amount of sides that is forming this object. Super cool, right? Another thing you can do is you have the profile here, and you can change the profile to create different types of literally meshes around curves. And this is extremely powerful because again, Maya Mesh cannot work with curves, but Maya Mesh can recognize meshes very easily. So you can create this guy and you can replicate this guy over and over and over, and we are going to do exactly that, okay? So imagine the possibilities of this. So you can create any type of effect. So for example, here I can create like a road or a crazy roller coaster, and I can have, for example, the amplitude, cycles offset. I have a bunch of settings here that I can change depending on the profile that I select, and I can even have a custom profile. I can draw a custom profile and I can use with this tool. So the power of this tool is absolutely amazing, tremendous. So I like very much this addition on Maya 2022. Okay, so we are going to use this guy to construct the top part. To work on this top part, I am going to select those guys here and I'm going to delete because I was just trying to demonstrate this principle. I would like to bring some things here. So top boards mesh. This is the boards on the top, just to have a little bit of reference of what I want to do. I would like to bring also the tower, and I don't need the base, I just want those guys to see the proportions, but it doesn't cost me to bring also the base, right? And I can try to model this top part now. So it's a very, very easy process. I'm going to curves, I'm going to create a NURBS curves, and I'm going to move this guy up and try to align this thing a little bit better, try to increase the size, try to bring close to this object here. Again, I don't know about the scale. Since I'm doing something very stylized, I'm trying to look to I don't know, to the scale of the object itself. So I don't know exactly if the scale is cool right now. So I'm going to duplicate this thing, going to bring this thing up a little bit, and I can select both objects right away and apply the same sweep node to both objects. So in this case, I can go to create sweep mesh, and right away we have the sweep mesh applied, and we can start working on the changes, right? It's just one node to both objects. So we can scale the profile, we can work on the precision here, because without precision we don't have enough information to kind of round this guy. What I usually do is I activate this wireframe on shaded, because if I do that I can see exactly what I'm doing. So again, I'm not looking for huge amounts of polygons. Something between 85 and 90 is more than enough. Okay, if I again think that I need more polygons, I can kind of smooth this thing later on. So I am not putting a lot of polygons because I know that I'm going to smooth this thing at the end. So I'm trying to again spare some polygons. Okay, so I like the size, I like everything is fine. So let me see, like 0.1. I want this thing a little bit bigger, so 0.15 is a good size, because now we have to create the profiles that we are going to replicate around this object, right? Again, you don't have to use mesh all the time if you're not comfortable using mesh, okay? Just so you know, we can go to the curves here, we can rename the curves, we can also rename the sweeps. We don't have to do that, by the way, but if you have the sweeps here, you can I'm going to organize this in later on. So in this case, I'm going to keep the sweep because I know that this is the product of the sweep command, okay? And I also have access to the nodes to change things. So keep in mind that I am doing that in purpose, because if I want to change things in the future, I can go back here and I can change things, and I can do some small tweaks before I just delete the history. If I delete the history, I will not have this opportunity in the future. Okay, so in this case, I am trying to keep this like the best of both worlds. Okay, so I think 1.5 is too much, so 1.25 would be a little bit better. And I'm going to create this profile for the center. We can use just a simple cylinder to do that. We don't have to create a sweep and then rotate the sweep. Okay, so I'm going to create a cylinder. By the way, how many sides I have here, just to be clear about that. So I have like 8 sides. 8 sides, I mean 8 divisions on this axis. Okay, I'm not talking about those divisions on the entire object. I'm talking about those edges that goes around the object. Okay. And this is important because I want to match this information. I don't need, by the way, but I like to. So in this case, I have this cylinder here, and I would like to put the same amount of information. So instead of 20, I will have 8. Okay, this is more than enough. I don't need to have more than this. And I'm going to delete the top faces and the bottom faces. And the easiest way to do that is if I select the body of the cylinder, I will not select the top and the bottom. I can go to select inverse, and I can delete those two parts. And I can rescale this object like this, okay? So everything is good to go. Now I can change and I can tweak things later on, and I just have to make this thing a little bit thinner than those guys here, okay? If you think this is too harsh, let me disable the wireframe shed. If you think that this thing is too harsh, you can go to the modeling menu set, go to the mesh display, and then set soften edge, and you'll see right away that everything is kind of smooth, okay? After we clean the scene, delete all the history and delete all the things that we don't want, I will probably go back and do that anyway, but just so you know, this is a good practice. So in this case here, I want to delete the history, freeze the transformations. I have the pivot points already centered in the middle of the object, and the object is in the middle of the word because I didn't move this object from the center of the word, okay? And again, I'm doing that because of mesh. Mesh requires the object to be centered as a way to facilitate our life and our comprehension of this replication, okay? So let's go to mesh. Let's click on this guy. Let's open up the mesh editor, and let's tweak this mesh. By the way, this is the top bars. And let's go to the mesh distribute. In this case, I would like to work on a radial way. And right away, you can see the axis is completely wrong. We can go to this axis here, and everything is at the center of the word, which is perfectly normal. We can bring those guys close to the center, okay? Be aware that sometimes when the value is very, very, very low, we have this weirdness of objects kind of vanishing, okay? When the value is very, very low. And one possible way to fix this problem is instead of using mesh, we can use other approaches, but don't worry about that, okay? So let's bring the original object here, the high cylinder. Let's hide this guy. And if you rotate the cylinder, remember, when we rotate objects, mesh is affected. When we move, not necessarily, okay? But when we rotate objects that generate copies, we affect very much the final result. So let's put 90 here, and that's why the objects are vanishing, because of the value that we put on the mesh distribute. The value is too low, so we have to amplify this a little bit, and you can see right away that the size is not ideal, okay? What we can do is we can take this original object and we can kind of rescale. Be careful with this type of modification. If you do that, you're going to affect the object as a whole, and the object is going to be pushed towards the center, okay? So this is probably one way to do that, but I don't know if this is the best possible way to do that, okay? Another thing that we can do is we can add right away on the top bars a transform node, and with this transform node we can create a handle here, and we can move this guy up to the original position, and you can see right away that okay, everything is working, and the size of this object is not that big anymore. So we can again work on the scale a little bit more and take this guy here and move a little bit more up. This is the only thing I don't like about mesh, which is we don't have a good visual feedback right away, so we have to tweak things that are far from each other, and we have to go back and change things. So this is something I really don't like very much, although the tool itself is very powerful. So again, select the transform. The transform, I mean this guy here, and you can bring this thing up. And okay, the height of the object is not enough anymore, so we have to work with the height of the object. Okay, so to do that, select the original object, and you can squeeze towards up. Okay, like this. Take this guy here and again move down just a little bit. Right now, the most important thing to us is if you need to edit the points here because they're not touching, you can go to the vertex mode. You can select one of the points. So this is the top. Those are the buttons. Okay, you can manipulate those like this. Okay. And this kind of solves the problem right now, because when we clean the scene, we're going to get rid of all the things we don't want, okay? And I'm going to show you the proper way to literally clean the scene and keep just the final meshes, so we can apply materials and do this kind of thing, okay? So keep in mind that a good workflow is this one that we are using, okay? Vert bar, those are the top. Yeah, so a good workflow is exactly this one that we are doing right now. So we are kind of keeping all the history, we are kind of keeping everything alive, because if we need to go back and change small things, we can do this in the future. Okay, so just hide this guy here, and now we are good to go to model the top part of the tower. To model this top part, I would like to use a different approach, okay, with a little bit of precision. I'm not going to use mesh anymore because I don't need, but I'm going to keep using the modeling techniques that we already know, and I'm also going to use some curves to create sweep meshes, because I think this is a very good technique, okay? So how to work on this top part? I would like to start with a sphere. I'm going to take this sphere here. I'm going to bring to the top. And just in case I need to repeat this procedure in the future, I would like to have some sort of precision here. Okay, so for example, I'm going to use some unities here. So for example, if I take this guy here, move to the top, about this height here, this is going to be like 35, I would say. 35 in height, and let's go to the inputs here and take the radius of this sphere and make it a little bit bigger. Okay, the point here is I want to see the size of this sphere, the radius of this sphere, and if this thing works with what I have in mind. So in this case, I want, let me see, 2. 2 is a very good size and proportion for this application here. Maybe a little bit more if we push to 3. 3 is probably way too much, but 2.5 is a good idea. So I have a sphere with the radius of 2.5. If I bring to the top, this is going to be like 32 or 32.5, just to be on the safe side. So this is going to be the unities of measure that we are going to use for this sphere. But at the same time, I have the impression that 2.5 would be way too much, so I'm going to work with just 2 here. Okay, the height of this guy, something like 32.5 is okay. Okay, again, I am doing the things and I'm taking the decisions as I move forward. I didn't plan to do anything, so this is going to be like the top part, like the beam of the lighthouse. So I'm going to delete this part, delete this bottom part. Okay, I'm going to the edge mode, double click here and right away shift right mouse button and extrude edge, and I'm going to center this handles here. As you can see, when we apply the extrude, the handle is always aligned with one of the random edges or faces or whatever. If you click on this guy, you are going to center the handle at the middle of the components that you chose to work with. So in this case, I just have to click and drag on this guy here until this thing goes into the structure. Okay. How much? I don't know. I really don't care. I just want to hide this bottom part here. Okay. So this is my base. So let's go to the object mode, and this is the base of what I'm going to construct here. Okay, now I have a very flat surface on the sides, and I have to maybe add a little bit of subdivisions in some parts and try to work on this internal structure, at the same time keeping this top part very isolated and very rounded, and I'm not going to touch on this top part. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is go to the edge mode, shift right mouse button and insert edge loop. I would like to have an edge loop around here, I would say, and maybe another edge loop a little bit up, something like this. And I would do the same thing here on this face, right about this guy. So I have like two edge loops and they're kind of flat. Okay. Why am I doing that? Because I would like to add a little bit of detailing on these parts. Okay. It's just a aesthetic decision. So I'm going to select both loops, and I'm going to shift right mouse button and extrude faces to the outside. Again, I don't care about the size. I just want something beautiful here, something you know, aesthetic pleasing. So this is going to be the outside part, and I would like to at the same time push this structure here, or at least keep this structure here intact, because I would like to use this structure to kind of create some windows or something here for, you know, emitting the light from this part. So this is my main goal here. And this bottom part, this can be a little bit bigger, you know. So if I select those guys here, we don't have to do anything other than rescaling this base if we want. But if I do that, can you see the problem? I'm going to exaggerate here. We are scaling those faces on all sides. I don't want that. I want, let's undo. If you click and drag on this guy here, you are going to scale this object just in this axis and this one. So if you click and drag, you will see that the scaling is always parallel to the faces. So I want something like this, like just to make this thing grounded and more solid at the bottom. Okay, maybe little less. I might replace those things with other objects, maybe some wood. I have no idea right now, but I'll try to think about this later on. Okay. I would like to try to create this internal structure, but at the same time, I think it's a good idea to push this structure here to the inside a little bit. So I'm going to select this thing and going to extrude faces, but in this case, I'm going to use the thickness to the inside. As you can see, I am pushing those guys to the inside part just with a little bit of precision, minus 0.1. This is more than enough to do the things I need to do. So, yep, now we have the basic structure I need. And to do the windows, I could use just this object here, and I could extrude, and I could cut some parts, and yeah, I could, but I don't want to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start using some curves to create this structure a lot of it's like imagine a door of a cell. It's like a checker pattern, but it's a circular one. So to do that, I'm going to use curves. The problem is, if I try to use a curve, I will have to guess the radius of this curve. So instead of doing that, I can extract the curves from the objects. Okay, so one very cool way to do that is if you go to the edge mode, double click on this curve here, you can take this curve and you can create a NURBS curves from this edge loop. Okay, so again, it's a whole edge loop, as you can see here. And I just have to select, double click to select the edge loop, and then you can go to modify, convert, and here you have a option to extract polygon edges to curves. Okay, and there is a bunch of options. Let's go to the options and you will see that we have pretty much the same options that we have when we draw curves. Okay, I already showed you those options. And we have a very cool option here called best guess. Okay, I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to use the same and the standard settings, and I'm going to click convert. When we do that, we will have this curve. But when we create new objects, we have the same scenario that we have when we create groups. The pivot point of this guy here on the top is at the center. So what we have to do is center pivot. Okay, and now if you go close to this guy, you can move this curve towards the top like this. Okay, so if I want to create one roll here, Control D, another one here, Control D again, another one here. This can be a good starting point to develop this structure. Okay, but I would like to also have some lines going up and down to do the other part of this grid. So how to do that? So in this case, I can use the edges from the main object. So let's try to isolate this guy to read a little bit better. Okay, but just using this perspective is a little bit tricky to see if we are selecting the right ones. Okay, so let's go to the top, and I would like to think a little bit more about this thing. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 24, 22 or 24 edges here. I am a little bit lazy to count, but I don't have to count. So if you remember, when we double click to select the edge ring, this is not a edge loop, this is a edge ring, we have this guy here on the top, and he says that we have 20. That means that if I want to create that structure, what I have to do is, the easiest solution for this is we can select every other edge like this to take out of this selection. Make sense? Something like this. I don't even know if this is going to be too much. I'll discover in a second. Okay, so I'm just selecting alternate edges, and you will see that now we have a bunch of edges selected, every other edge, and we can use this thing to create curves. So let's go again to modify, convert, polygon edges to curves, and I created a bunch of curves here. Okay, so let's go. Let me see if I have all the curves. And that's the funny thing. He is saying that we have just... Let me try to hide this. Oh, yeah, I'm not seeing the curves because I am on the isolation, maybe? But no, that's not the problem. He created one curve out of this technique, and he didn't create the other curves. That's interesting. So I will consider that that didn't work very well. So let's try to go back a little bit to the point where we have like the edges selected, okay? And let's try to do this once again. So modify, convert, polygon edges to curve. That might be an issue, okay? So let me see if we have any issues here on the setting. There is nothing to select actually, and he's just creating always just one single object, and that's a funny thing because even after I select everything, all the edges, he's just creating one. So yeah, we can work with that. So how to deal with this problem? So I have just one curve. This is not an issue because based on this curve here, let me center the pivot of this guy. Based on this curve here, we can play with the settings, but I think this curve is not the best one. To be very honest, if I want to model things and I want a little bit of precision, I always have to take the edge that goes towards the center, and the edge in this case that goes towards the center is this one here. Let's go to the edge, this one. Okay, let's do that with just one curve, because if something goes wrong, we can use just this curve and generate the mesh of this curve and take this mesh and loop around. So let's go to the modify and convert and use the polygon edges to curve, and that's more than enough. Let's center the pivot and center the pivot, and let's try to move this thing close to the other structure, like close to the other curves. And now we can select all the curves and we can see the final result of the sweep that we're going to create. But before doing that, I would like to center the pivot, delete the history, freeze transformation of this guy. So this is going to be the beam. I don't know how to call this thing, but this is like the most important part of the lighthouse itself. And I have like the curves here, and I am ready to take those curves and play with the sweep mesh. But before doing that, just to be sure that I don't have anything interfering on my object, I delete the histories, freeze the transformations, everything, and now I can go to the sweep mesh. By the way, the icon here on the sweep mesh is exactly the same. So instead of going to create sweep mesh, you can go to the poly modeling and click here, and you will see the same result. Okay, just remembering that I'm using the same node to everybody, so I just have to go to the node itself on any object, and all the objects are going to be affected because they have like the same settings. Okay, so first of all, I would like to use this guy here because it's a square or a squarish shape. I would like to make the scale of this profile a little bit smaller, and I would like to make the precision a little bit higher. So 85 or something above 85 is going to give us something kind of rounded and good enough to go. So for example, if I go to this guy here, I still have the live sessions. You know, I still have the live sweep creator, and I can use somehow the same parameters. So if you go to any of those guys, as I said, everybody's connected. You can decrease the profile, but not too much, of course. So let me see something like 0.5. Oh, 0.5 is not good enough. So 0.75. 0.75 is a good number. I guess it's a good number. And I think this is a very cool result. But I kind of don't like the fact that they are crossing each other. And at the same time, I think we can put a little bit more detail here. So for example, if I take this profile and subdivide, this is going to be good, I would say. Very smooth. The final result is going to be nice. But if you want, you can change the corner segments here, for example, to increase the detail on every corner. I strongly advise you to not do that. The corner depth is going to help you to create this type of profile on your objects, okay? The corner radius is going to tight a little bit, those guys. Is going to approximate this thing a little bit. So 0.4, it's a good number, okay? Because I want always rounded things, okay? And the only thing I don't like is this profile here is having exactly the same size of the other curves, and this might be an issue. So I would like to make this guy a little bit bigger. I would say this guy here a little bit bigger. So how to do that? So first of all, this the lack of precision is bothering me. So I would like to put I don't know, 90 here, just to have a more curved session, okay? But on this case here, 90 is adding a lot of information on the horizontal, and I don't need this amount of information, okay? What I'm going to do, just this guy, okay, not the other object, right? Just this guy. I'm going to delete the history. I'm going to freeze the transformations and center the pivot. If I do that, I can go to the scale tool and I can make this profile a little bit bigger. As you can see, I can have this type of effect, okay? If you want to push this towards the center, you can also do that. And now I'm quite happy with the result. I would like to push this guy towards the outside just a little bit, something like this. And I would also, as a matter of optimization, I would like to get rid of these subdivisions in the middle. So I don't have to do that. If you don't want to do that, you don't have to. I do that because everything I do, I try to optimize as much as I can. Because the purpose here is to have something good, but at the same time, something without a lot of polygons, because I'm going to subdivide this in and I have to be aware of the amount of polygons that I'm using. So I selected all the edges, and to delete those edges, you cannot use delete. We already discussed this. So if you delete edges, just using delete, you're going to left a lot of vertices behind. So if you want to delete all the edges and the vertices, you have to use Control Backspace, okay? If you delete with Control Backspace, you have a very clean scene and no edges in between. Okay, and this is exactly the purpose. Let's go out of the isolate mode and we are good to go. The only thing I would like to do here is, since we have the same object, we are not going to have the same material on the top, on the bottom, and on this light beam, okay? If you want to put more details on this light beam, you can, but you don't have to worry too much about this, okay? What I'm going to do is, let's go to the edge. Let's double click on this edge on the top, this edge loop, shift, double click on this edge loop. What I'm going to do is I'm going to separate this content in the middle to have two separate objects. I will have like the beam itself, and I have this thing in the middle that could be the light. I'm not sure if I'm going to left this object there. Okay, another option is, instead of having this object here, we could just delete the object. That might be a solution. So for example, if you double click and select the loop, you can delete. Of course, there's a hole on this thing. You have to close this hole. How to close this hole? So let's go to the edge mode. If you double click on this edge, you can just rescale this edge towards the center. Okay. And my suggestion is, if you close this guy towards the center, you will have a lot of triangles. Okay. If you don't want to do that, you can also create some sort of extrusion here. So with this edge selected, you can go to the extrude edge and you can center the handle and then click and drag to the inside. If you do that, you will have a bunch of four-sided faces. You will have more polygons, yeah, maybe, but you will also have a bunch of four-sided polygons. Okay. If you really want to put everything together and create a triangle way, or a bunch of triangles here, another way to deal with that is, instead of extruding things, you can just do what I did. So select the edges, okay? And you have to collapse this thing towards the center. So if you have shift right mouse button, you will see that you have this merge / collapse edge, okay? Merge edges to center would be the option, okay? And if you click on this guy, you will see that all the edges, they become just one vertex, okay? So if you click outside and click and drag here, you will see that you just have one vertex selected, okay? We kind of transform all the things in just one vertex. Okay, this is super cool. If you want to keep this thing like this, you can. But if you want to get rid of the triangles, something you can do is you can go to the edge mode and you can select every other edge like this. If you have a bunch of things in the middle and they are kind of ruining your life in the sense of not allowing you to work properly, you can isolate just this object, because we're going to do the same thing here on the top, okay? So let's go to the edge. And right away, if you don't want to extrude anything or if you don't want to rescale anything, shift right mouse button and go to merge, collapse, merge edges to center, and problem solved, right? If you want to delete this edge outside, let's suppose that you are not going to use that for anything, or if you really don't want that, you can delete. I'm going to left because if I want to put some detail on this guy, I can, okay? So let's work with the triangle thing, okay? So to delete the triangles and keep everything four-sided, you can select one edge, skip one, select one, skip one, and go one. Okay, if you do that, you just have to hit Control Backspace. And now you have a bunch of four-sided faces. You can do the same thing on the top. So select alternate edges, jump one, select one, jump one, select one, jump one, select one, jump one, select one, and Control Backspace. And now we have four-sided faces. If you want to put even more detail on this guy, you can. I don't have to tell you how to do that, but I'm going to also, before doing that, if you go to the channel box, you see that we already have a lot of history. Let's delete those things. And let's try to go to the edges here, 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 shift here, here, and here. Okay, let's select all those guys. And let's try to apply a bevel on this thing to make everything a little bit more rounded. Okay, so bevel edge, 0.5 is fine. Let's add two or three segments. It's more than okay for the purpose that we are looking for here. Okay, so we just have to delete the history once again. And if you try to smooth this surface, you will see that this is what we have, okay? And when we smooth the surface with quads, this is the final result. So it's a beautiful way to work with meshes, okay? Everything is quad except this top part. So we can apply the same technique here on the top. So how to do that? Again, go to the edge mode and select one, skip one. And after you have this selection, Control Backspace, and you will have a bunch of four-sided faces. And again, if you smooth this guy, you will see that the surface is perfect. That is, everything is really, really smooth, and we cannot see any artifacts. So we call those small defects on the surface of the object artifacts when we smooth the object. And something weird happened with the meshes. Okay, so in this case, we can go outside of the isolation and we are ready to take this object here and replicate several times. But to do that, we have to at least have this object like centered, like we have here, the pivot point of the object, not the object itself. And we can put this object at the center of the world, okay? Just to be on the safe side, center, delete history, freeze transformation. We can take this object and we can go to the top view, with the object selected, we can isolate the object and we can use the snap to grids to move this object to the center. So now this object is at the center, but we have a transformation here. So freeze transformation, and we are good to go. We're going to take this guy and we're going to replicate this guy around. Okay, try to remember that we have a bunch of curves here, and the curves are controlling the object if you didn't delete the history. So in this case here, we still have the sweep mesh. If you go to the attributes, you see that we have the sweep mesh controlling all those meshes here. I just deleted the history on this guy because I wanted him to be a little bit bigger. So I don't need this curve anymore. We can delete, and we can take this guy, apply a new mesh. This is going to be the beam vertical bar, and we can apply a new mesh to this guy, and we can open up this guy, and right away we have the name of the object here on the top, so we can very easily access the node that is doing the thing. Okay, and we can do this on a radial form. The angle is completely wrong, so we have to fix the angle, and we have to fix the alignments as well. As you can see, everything is kind of weird because we have to take this guy here and work with the right rotation. When we do that, the objects, they go back to the place they're supposed to be. So in this case, 90 degrees, and we have to click on this guy, click twice, not double click. Okay, what I mean by click twice is click and click again to see those options. We have to work with the radius here, and the radius is the most important setting. Again, if you think that you don't have like a good amount of control when you use this guy here, what you have to do is you just have to go to the channel box, because you are already selecting this thing and changing this thing. If you go to the channel box, you will see that you have this repro mesh, and you have you don't have all the options here to change whatever. Okay, but you can go to the beam vert bar here and try to see the mesh distribute, and try to see this guy here, which is the radius. Okay, hold control, click and drag, and you have like a smoother option, I would say, to manipulate this guy. So here we have a very cool beam. Okay, so you don't have to do anything other than that, because I think this is more than enough to what I want to represent. But if you really want to do something else, you can model extra objects to put on at the center of this beam. But I'm going to skip this part. Okay. By the way, you are seeing this one number here because I put the same number, the same name, beam vertical bar obj here. And here we can take this beam vertical bar, just the name. So as you can see, this is a way to get rid of the thing. So we just have to put unique names. Okay. So now we have this top part built. So everything is perfect. Everything is fine. We can try to add a little bit of detail if you really think that you need detail. But I would like to discuss other objects. I don't have to spend more time detailing this thing. So let's jump to the window, how to do a window here on the side of this tower. As you can see, this window is very simple. So looks very complicated, but it's not. It's just a square, and I have a bunch of separated objects probably to form this inside part of the window. But I think we can do something more stylized and at the same time something simpler. So we don't need to do something extremely complicated, because we are going to see this window by far. So we are not going to see this thing on a very close range. So we can do something at the same time a little bit better and more stylized. So let's jump into Maya and let's do this. This is exactly what I have. so far. Of course, I have more things than I want on the screen right now, but I just brought this thing to get the orientation of what I want. Okay, so I'm going to build a different type of window, a very stylized one, a very simple one. And I would like to start, instead of doing a squared window like the one from the reference, I would like to do something a little bit different. So I'm going to select all those things, hide those things, and I'm going to start with cylinder. If you go close to this guy, we can select the top faces, like hit tab, click and drag, select all the top faces, and I'm going to invert the selection. So select invert, Control Shift I, to delete the other part. So I'm going to select this thing. As you can see, the pivot point is here, but I'm going to center the pivot, activate the snap, and move this guy to the center of the grid. Okay, I'm going to delete this bottom part here because I don't need this part, and I can extrude those two edges here. Let's go to edge, select this edge and this edge, and take a look. My snap to grid is still activated. So I'm going to extrude the edge, click and drag, and as you can see, it snaps on every point of my grid. Okay, so this is a way to work with precision, but keep in mind that sometimes this is a little bit annoying, so you have to go there and you have to disable this option. Okay, so let's finish the command and go back to edge, because now what I would like to do is I would like to select those edges here to insert a loop. The problem is if I try to insert a loop with the insert edge loop, I have a bunch of triangles here, and the insert edge loop requires four-sided faces to at least know where to go. Okay, in this case we have to give a little bit of help to the tool, and we cannot use the insert edge loop. We have to use the connect component. Okay, in this case the connect components is we have to select those components here. So hit tab, click and drag on the edges to select like this, and then hold shift, right mouse button, and connect components. But this component is connecting the other components by the middle. As you can see, it's kind of the middle of the components. Okay, so I would like to take this edge loop here and kind of offset to the external part, close to the loop on the outside. So double click on this guy, shift right mouse button, and use the command slide edge with the middle mouse button, click and drag to do this. Okay, so this is more than I need. Another thing I need is I need edge loops here and here on the top. So I'm going to the edge, insert edge loop, and I'm going to insert one here. Since this is four-sided, I can do that very easily. And another one here, and we are good to go. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I can delete those faces because I don't need those faces anymore. But we have a problem. And the problem is, let me hide my grid here. We have this edge in the middle, and I would like to have two edges here in the middle because I would like to have something like close to this thing, or at least very close to this reference here. So with this with like a polygon strip here in the middle. Okay, how to do that? Well, first of all, I would like to take this edge and shift right mouse button and control backspace and delete those guys with the vertices. Let's take a look at the history. We have a lot of history here. Delete the history, freeze the transformation, center the pivot, just to be on the safe side. And now we can save this in, and we can use the insert edge loop. But I would like to show you a very cool feature on the insert edge loop. If you go to the insert edge loop, instead of just using the insert edge loop, we can go to the options. Okay, by default, that's why I like to use the option window here. We can reset the option. By default, this is relative from the distance, so you can basically click and drag to add loops. I don't want that. I want to add more than one loop, so I'm going to use this option here called multiple edge loops with just 2 edge loops. If you click on the object, doesn't matter if you move your mouse or not, he's going to insert 2 edge loops with the same distance. Okay. In Blender, the way to work with this is more practical because you insert the edge loop and you can use the mouse up and down to multiply or to insert even more edges. This is not the case here, okay? So you just have to click and we have 2, and click here and we have 2, and that's it. So my recommendation is the tool is still active, as you can see by this icon here. You just have to click on reset tool, because the next time you use this tool, you can go to the options and you can change if you want, but reset the tool, close the window, and now we are good to go. We are going to select this edge, shift this edge, and this edge, and we are going to squeeze those edges towards the center to have more or less the same thing that we have here, okay? And we are going to take the edge, this edge, and this edge, and we have to connect those 2 edges with a bridge, okay? Shift right mouse button and go to the bridge, and that's it, okay? So now that we have those objects, this can be the frame of my window, okay? And everything is 4-sided, everything is beautiful, everything is awesome. So I'm very happy with the result. Try to delete the history, try to freeze the transformation, center the pivot, just to get used to the concept. And let's keep moving. So the first thing we need to do is to take the entire object. We don't even have to go to the face mode to do that. Let's go to the object mode, shift right mouse button, and we are going to extrude everything to the top to create some thickness here. Okay, so let's suppose that this is what we are looking for. Okay, and after that we can use this window on a very simple way, or we can create besides the frame, I imagine the frame is going to be like wood, and we have the glasses. Okay, we can, since this is a very stylized architecture, I don't need to put a lot of details, okay? I want to put some details, but not a lot of details, okay? So in this case, what I would like to do is, I would like to have some window inside, okay? To have that, I can go to the edges, double click, to select. Yeah, we have this problem here. That's why it's not selecting. We have also the back side, and I don't need this back side, to be honest. So let's go to the face, click on this face, and click on this face here, and he's going to select the loop, delete. So you can select this loop here, delete, and select this face here, delete. As you can see, now we have like a hole on the back, and this is exactly what we have, okay? Or what we want, sorry. And now we need to fill those holes here with polygons, okay? To do that, we can go to edges, double click here, shift, double click here, and shift, double click here, and you will select the holes, right? So now we can use a command called fill. So if you hold shift, right mouse button, you can fill hole, and you are going to cover those guys with polygons. Here, everything is fine because we have 4-sided, and here we have a problem because we have a hexagon, okay? So first of all, everything is, you know, together because everything is just one piece. We should separate those guys because if I want to apply one material on the frame and another material on the glass, I can do that if I have separated materials, if I have separated objects, sorry. And the way I like to do that is, again, we have to go to edges. They are already selected, as you can see here, okay? And on those edges, we have to use 2 commands. We have to use the detach to first kind of detach the edges and create separate objects. And then we can go to mesh separate to literally have separated meshes, okay? So on the edge mode, with those edges selected, you can go to edit mesh detach, and then go back to the object mode and take a look here. You will see when we use the mesh separate, we will have a bunch of polygons, a bunch of meshes actually inside the group, and this is exactly what we want. So let's select everything, okay, and let's delete the history, freeze the transformation. Let's take this group here and delete the group. Edit, ungroup, and when you use the ungroup, you can delete the group without deleting the content. So this is the window frame, and those guys here, they are the glass, okay? So if you want, you can connect everybody, which is a very good idea, by the way, to have just one object to make your life a little bit easier. If you don't want, you don't have to, but I usually work with connected components with like single meshes because it makes my life a little bit easier. If you activate the wireframe on shader, you will see that here we have a problem. Here is everything is fine, and here we have a problem. And the problem is I have a end gun, okay? And I have a lot of points here, those points here. This is because of the mesh that originated all those points, okay? How to solve this? We have a lot of ways to do that. So one way is go to the vertex, select this vertex here, and I would like to connect this vertex to this point, for example. If you select this guy and this guy, you can shift right mouse button and use the connect components, but this is a little bit slow, okay? So if you want to do this on a faster way, I would say what you can do is, first of all, delete the history just to guarantee. I'm going to do this with all the objects that I am working with. Delete the history, freeze the transformations just to be on the safe side. Save this scene because, you know, things can happen. And now we are going to use the multi-cut. So select the object, go to the multi-cut, and this tool works like this. You have a point here. If you click on this guy, and if you click on this guy here, you just have to hit enter, okay? And now we have 1, 2, 3, 4. This is exactly what I want. I'm going to connect this guy to this guy. Enter. I'm going to connect this guy with this guy. Enter. This guy with this guy, enter. And we have a problem here because I have a point here in the middle. If I delete this point, I'm going to lose this curve here. This curve is perfect because if you remember, I started with a cylinder, okay? So what we can do in this case, so click on this point, and I would like to connect this point to this edge here. But to be more precise, before you click on the edge, hold shift. If you hold shift, the knife tool is going to try to find the middle of the edges, and you just have to click. When you click, you connect both, and you just have to hit enter. And now I have 4-sided faces everywhere. Okay, the topology is horrible, but at least they are all 4-sided. Okay, let's go outside of the isolation. Everything is fine. We just have to take this guy, this guy, this guy, the glasses, right? And we have to make this just one object. What we can do now, again, you don't have to do that, but if you want, you can put everything inside the same mesh like this. Select everybody, go to mesh, combine. This is one thing. Delete the history, freeze the transformation, center the pivot, and you can do bridges between those objects. This is one thing you can do. You can connect the components here. This is another thing you can do. Or if you want to make everything separated like this, you can. So you don't have to do anything if you don't want. So let's rename this guy. And now we have window frame, window glass. Let's go outside of the isolation. As you can see, we have both objects. One thing I would like to do is just to make sure that everything is centered. Okay, I am always working at the center to make my life a little bit easier. So try to think about that when you do your modeling when you model your object. Okay, so select everybody, delete history, freeze transformation, center pivot. Center pivot is a way to centralize the pivot on the center of the object, not at the center of the world. Okay, to align things at the center of the world, you have to use another approach. We already discussed that. So I'm going to take this edge here from the outside of the frame, and I'm going to push this down. I don't have to extrude, I just have to push down a little bit because my tower is rounded. Okay, I would like to put this window kind of inside the tower, and I want part of the tower, of course, part of the window I would like to see like to the external side. But since my tower is very cylindrical, if I don't have more mesh to the inside of the tower, I will have problems of not having enough window. I don't know if you understand the problem, but I'm going to show you in a minute. Okay, so I'm going to take those two guys here, actually on the object mode. I'm going to take those two guys again, center pivots, delete history, freeze transformations, everything is renamed, and I'm going to group. Okay, when I group the objects, the center pivot is at the center of the world, I would say, but the center pivot of the group should be at the center of the object itself. So if you click here again, you will see that the pivot point jumps to the center of the object itself. So this is going to be window 0, 1, because I will have like two windows. Okay, let's bring back the tower. Let's take this guy out of the way. Actually, we have to be aware of that. Okay, since I center the pivot on the object is outside of the center of the world, at least in one of the axes. Make sense? So to put back, we have to activate this thing. We have to move to the center, and I always start moving things from the center to make my life a little bit easier. Again, it's a good practice. Okay, that's it. So everything is fine now, and now I can bring back the other objects. I'm going to select everything. Of course, I'm going to bring back more things that I want. And now I have to decide. So for example, on this side here, I would like to have my house, because the house is going to be connected with the lighthouse. I'm going to do like just one object, like my main reference. And I would like to take the window, and I would like to move. Let's disable the snap to grids. I would like to move to this side. Okay, I would like to rotate like this, which is minus 90, and I would like to rotate like this, which is minus 90, I would say, or 0. Oh, so just 0. Cool. So my window is perfectly, there is no minus 0, by the way. My window is perfect, and now I can move this guy here. I can try to match with the alignments. I can put whatever I want. I really don't care about the alignment. But I noticed that I kind of missed something very important. Okay, so as you can see, I would like to push this window towards the tower, but I don't want to see this interpenetration, sorry, of meshes on the glass. Can you see the glass? Yes, I don't want to see that happening. And just to have a little bit of precision on this axis here, we should use a cool number like, I don't know, 18 would be 18, just to have this thing here. If you think this is too low, you can put even higher if you want. So to all the effects, I think this is super cool. The size is okay. The style is a little bit weird. What I mean by the style is I'm going to save this window, and I just have to add a little bit of bevel around this object, because if I try to smooth this object right now, I might have some problems. Okay, so the best way to do that is save the scene, and now we are going to select the loops, and we put some bevel edges on those guys. To add a little bit of detailing on this window, I can isolate the selection. I can go to the add mode, select the loops I want to work with. In this case, you have to be aware that sometimes when you double click on the edge, the entire loop is not going to be selected, but everything is fine. So you just have to go there and select by yourself all the edges that you want to interact or you want to change. So in this case, just to check, hit 4 to see if you selected just the edges that you want to bevel, and those are the edges I want to bevel. And you can go back and shift right mouse button and bevel edges. Okay, so in this case, I would like to use 0.5 as a fraction. I would like to have at least 3 segments. Maybe check always if you have any issues. So I'm going to put one more, 4 segments, just to have a little bit of roundness on those parts and to see if everything is going to hold properly when we try to smooth this mesh. I think we don't have enough information, still don't have enough information to smooth those guys, but let's try. It doesn't cost, right? So if I hit 3, and right away I can see the problem. This looks like a very old radio, I would say. And to solve this problem, we probably need more information than we have, okay? And this information, we should go back before the bevel, okay? This information depends on the amount of polygons that we have. Sometimes we definitely don't have enough polygons to make things hold with a shape. So if you want to keep the shapes of this thing here, you have to add divisions on both sides. To make my life a little bit easier, what we can try to do here is to work with symmetry, because when we do things on one side, we do the same things on the other side. So just to be on the safe side, delete history, freeze transformation, center pivot, and we can try to use the object symmetry, in this case X, because X is the axis that is crossing the object on this direction. Okay, so if that's the case, let's try symmetry object X, and let's go to the edge. So if I select this edge here, so as you can see, it's not working. So it's not selecting the edge on the other side. And this is a little bit frustrating sometimes, because you expect the tool to work on a more predictable way, right? So in this case, if the tool is not working, my advice for you is go outside of the symmetry, okay? And what we need is to cut this object perfectly in the middle. So if you go to the side view, let's see, side viewport, and here you can see the problem. We have this edge in the middle here, but we don't have the same edge in the middle because we deleted the edge in purpose to construct this shape here. If that's the case, we can bring the edge in the middle back on a very simple way. You just have to click on this edge, hold shift, click on the next edge to select an entire edge loop. If I select all the edges on actually this is not a edge loop, this is a edge ring. Edge loop would be a continuation of edges. To select the edge ring, so shift right mouse button, connect components, and you are going to connect exactly in the middle. So you have half of the object on one side, half of the object on the other side. Go to the face mode and select just half of the object like this, okay? And delete. So fear not, everything will be fine, okay? We just have to add a little bit of information on both sides. And to do that, it's time to, again, delete the history, but please do not move the pivot, do not center the pivot, because the pivot is already at the center of the original object. If you center the pivot now, you will have to probably take this pivot here and move to the center. I explained how to do that on my first video of this whole sequence, okay? I don't want to repeat myself. So let's, I don't want to repeat myself more than what I already do, okay? So let's try to play with the insert edge loop in some parts here, okay? So first of all, this thing is not holding, because if you try to smooth this part, you see that we don't have enough polygons to hold the structure here, okay? What we should do is we should insert some edge loops. So let's go to insert edge loop here, and we have to insert one here, one here. Try to distribute your vertices on a very balanced way, okay? And another one here. And try to smooth. You will see that, oh, okay, now it's kind of working. It's not quite there yet because we probably need to add a little bit of edges to hold this edge here. So if you try to smooth now, sorry, we have to select the object. If you try to smooth now, you see, oh, now it's working, right? Here on the side it's moving too much because, of course, we need to insert more loops there, but we will do that when we bevel the edges. Okay, so let's go back and let's try to do the same thing on this side here. We need to, again, edge, insert edge loop here, insert edge loop here. We already have this edge loop here, and if I try to smooth, it's going to work fine, like exactly like the other side. And we have to insert here and insert here. What we want to do is, yes, we want to smooth, but we want to keep the edges a little bit tighter in some parts. So this is way too far. We can go back a little bit, and there we go. I think this is going to be good enough. If you try to smooth, you will see that the inside part is kind of holding together finally. So what we can do in this case is we can delete the history because we have a huge history already, and we can try to bevel the edges now. Let's try. So if you go to this loop, shift this loop, shift this loop, this loop, this loop, and finally this loop. If we try to bevel those things. Now let's see, bevel edge with segments, 2 segments, it's more than enough, okay? So be careful with the fraction here, because if you put this thing way too far, you will start seeing weird things happening. So I think 0.5 is probably a good value. With 2 subdivisions is more than enough. And of course, we need the same thing here on the outside. I kind of forgot to select this guy here. Let's do this thing properly, right? So let me undo, undo, undo. Until I have the selection of the edges, like I have here, hold shift. Hold shift and let me select again, because this is not a good work. So double click on this guy, hold shift, double click on this guy, shift, double click, double click, double click, double click. So now we have all those edges, and finally this edge, and then this edge. When I try to bevel, shift, let's bevel the edges. When I try to bevel, we can add 2 segments, and there we go. I think this is more than enough to make the thing happen. So I might have problems here, but let's see first, okay? So let's go to the object mode, select the object, hold 3, and as I suspected, it's bending too much here. What we have to do is we need more edges here, more control edges on this part. So let me see. If I go to edge, deselect everything, okay? Go to insert edge loop tool and insert one here and another one here, and I think this is more than enough to make the thing hold, I suppose. I don't know if this part is working well, so let's try to smooth. I think it's okay, it's quite okay. But if you want to hold even more here, you should add another edge loop on the top. So let's go to add. Again, I always deselect everything and then shift right mouse button and insert edge loop 2, and then I will insert another one here because we already have this one and now we have this one. And now we hold 3 and everything is fine. So finally we have something that is at the same time kind of smooth and but have solid angles. Okay, this is what we want. If you think the topology is horrible, don't worry, the topology is fine because we add polygons on certain places and certain objects. Let's hide this thing. Certain objects, they have this harsh transition, I would say, between the edges. And sometimes we put edges very close to each other. If you want to remove some edges, if you want to change a little bit the behavior of edges, what you can do is something that we already did. So you select the entire loop and then shift right mouse button and go to slide edge. With the middle mouse button, you can move this thing to the top or to the bottom. So I think this is probably a good idea in some cases. And if you try to smooth, you will see that you have a better transition. Okay, so now we can take this object and we can flip to the other side. Okay, the way we do that is, first of all, we have to check if all the vertices, they are perfectly aligned in the middle, and if this object is perfectly in the middle. It is, because I deleted the other half. The second thing you have to check is if the pivot point is perfectly in the middle of the object that I'm going to mirror. Okay, and the third thing you have to check is the axis. So in this case, positive x. Every direction that the arrows point, they are the positive. So for example, the red one is the x, this is the positive side, this is the negative side. So what we have to do is go to the edit mesh, and here we have actually, I think it's on, yes, it's on mesh. Inside mesh we have mirror. Okay, before trying this thing, go to the options and reset everything. The first thing we have to do is mirror axis position, the word. Yes, it's the word because the object is perfectly centered in the word. So by default, he considered the word. The mirror axis is on the x. Yes, axis, but it's positive or negative. So I'm taking this guy and replicating to the positive side or to the negative side. So in this case, positive side. So I have to go here and put positive. Okay, do you want to combine this thing with the original object? Yes, I would like to combine and to merge everything, and let's mirror. When you do that, you will have another object on the other side, and the only thing you have to check is, let's go to the perspective. My poly mirror node is here. You have to check this. Can you see? This is happening, this weird thing here is happening because of this value here, merge threshold. Everything equal or underneath this value here is going to be merged. So every point that have his distance equal or less to this guy is going to be merged. So what we have to do is we need to decrease this value to a small value, okay? Smaller until we do not see things merging anymore. But they're going to merge, but they're not going to merge too much. If this thing, this is the value, by the way, I'm going to Control C on this value here. If you put this value too high, you will see a lot of objects, a lot of points literally fusing, okay? And this is a little bit crazy. So try to be aware of this problem, okay? So in this case, I have to use a 0 point something. So with control, you have a better way to work with those values here. So it's 0.18. So something very close to 0, but not 0, okay? So until you see like the objects, they are together, but they're not merging anymore, and we can finish this window. So just so you know, if you don't merge the vertices and you try to select, for example, the points here on the top, you have to check if you have one vertex, okay? If you click and drag, you should see one vertex. What that means, when I mirror the thing to the other side, I should have 2 points, 2 vertices on top of each other. When I use this merge option with the threshold, merge threshold, I kind of fuse the points together. I don't have 2 points, I just have 1, and this is exactly what I want. Okay, if you go to faces, let's suppose that you really need to check. If you double click on this thing, it will select everything. If you don't use the merge vertices, you will have like, when you double click, you're just going to select one part and another part. Okay, two meshes inside one, 2 objects inside the same mesh, I would say. Let's delete the history, freeze the transformation, center the pivot, and go outside of the isolation. Okay, and we are just working with the window. So now if I let's save the scene, and if I smooth the window, you will see that the window is quite rounded. Everything is the way I wanted. Okay, you should check if you can take this window here to the outside a little bit, and if you can take the entire window and put inside a little bit, if you think this is way too far from the tower, but I am pretty satisfied with the result. Okay, so remember, if you move anything, if you change anything, you have to select the object and then delete the history, freeze the transformation, center the pivot, take this group here and duplicate to the other side. Okay, the easiest way to take this entire group and duplicate to the other side is the objects are already inside the group. Okay, I just have to use this option here on the top. If you are not seeing this menu here on the top, this is the absolute transform. We already used this guy. Okay, if you click on this guy, you will see the absolute transform. If it's hidden, you can show, okay, some parts of the interface. Sometimes it's hidden, so you just have to click on this. And if you are seeing anything here, just have to select the absolute transform. And now you can take the pivot point of the group, not the object. Okay, go to the group itself, hit D, and now you can reposition this guy. If you want, you can reposition, of course, using the snap to grids and put this point at the center of the word. Another way to do that is using the absolute transform. So I'm going to put 0, 0, 0 and hit enter. When you do that, the pivot point goes to the center of the word, the 0, 0, 0 of the word. Okay, let's go outside of this pivot mode, and then we can take the entire group, in this case the window, right? And we can control D to duplicate, and we can click and drag to scale this thing to the other side. And we have to put like -1 here, and we are good to go. So we have both windows. Just remember, this is a transformation, okay? So if that's the case, you have to select the object and then freeze the transformations, okay? Both windows are perfect. They are rounded. So let me select both and hit 1, okay? By the way, you don't have to round this object. This is a very flat object, okay? If you try to round this guy, you will see that sometimes you will see some weird things happening. So that there is no need for rounded everything or subdividing everything. What I mean by round is subdivide, okay? There is no need to subdivide everything on your scene. So be aware of that. For flat objects, that doesn't make any sense, okay? So be aware of that, and we are good to go to model the house. But since this video is already very, very long with a lot of techniques, with a lot of information, if you follow me so far, I would like to stop this video here and do the house on the next video. So this is going to be a very long project, a very detailed one, but if you really want to learn things about modeling, this is the way to go. See you on the next session.